In the modern age of excess, men have traded wisdom for stimulation. They have silenced the voice of ancient understanding that once guided kings, warriors, prophets, and philosophers toward discipline and inner power. They have turned away from the quiet strength that builds nations, from the patience that refines character, and from the restraint that guards the soul. This neglect of wisdom is not accidental. It is the natural outcome of a society that worships indulgence and mocks self-control. Nowhere is this more visible than in the forgotten practice of semen retention, a discipline that ancient wisdom upheld as sacred, but modern men ridicule as unnecessary. The truth is simple yet profound. When men ignore wisdom, they become slaves to impulse. When they ignore semen retention, they sever themselves from their deepest potential. There was a time when men sought wisdom more than pleasure. In the temples of Kemet, India, and ancient China, sages taught young men that their seed was sacred. They spoke of it not merely as a biological fluid, but as a container of life force, the essence of creation. To waste it carelessly was seen as spiritual blindness, a kind of inner decay that led to weakness, confusion, and spiritual death. But in the modern world, that sacred understanding has been erased. Men have been conditioned to see ejaculation as harmless fun, a casual release, a trivial act disconnected from spiritual or psychological consequence. The idea of conserving seed is mocked as primitive or repressive. Yet, ancient wisdom reminds us that the power of man lies in restraint, not release, in mastery, not indulgence. When Solomon wrote, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom," Proverbs 4 verse 7, he spoke not of book knowledge but of divine order, the understanding that energy misused leads to destruction. To ignore wisdom is to ignore the laws that govern vitality itself. Semen retention is one of those laws. It is the wisdom of keeping the life force within, allowing it to refine thought, build willpower, and channel energy upward in a higher awareness. Men today, in their obsession with pleasure, have forgotten that the body was not made to be a playground for lust, but a temple for spiritual ascension. Modern culture celebrates indulgence as freedom. It tells men to enjoy themselves, to live in the moment, and to follow their desires. Yet, this very ideology enslaves them. A man who cannot say no to his urges is not free. He is imprisoned by them. Every day, the average man is bombarded by sexual imagery designed to drain his willpower. Pornography, social media, and entertainment work as tools of distraction, keeping him trapped in a cycle of craving and release. This constant stimulation desensitizes his mind and weakens his spiritual focus. He becomes reactive, not proactive, led by appetite rather than purpose. The result is a generation of men who are physically alive but spiritually asleep. Their eyes are open, but their vision is gone. They chase validation instead of mission, lust instead of love, pleasure instead of purpose. And in doing so, they ignore the ancient warning. He who loves pleasure will be a poor man. Proverbs 21 verse 17. The wisdom of semen retention teaches the opposite. It teaches a man to govern his impulses, to transmute desire into discipline, and to redirect his sexual energy into the pursuit of excellence. By ignoring this, men have not only lost spiritual strength, but also mental clarity and emotional stability. To understand why ignoring semen retention is ignoring wisdom, one must grasp the energetic principle behind it. Semen is not merely a reproductive substance. It is the concentrated essence of a man's vitality. It contains the life energy that can create another human being. That alone reveals its significance. When a man ejaculates excessively, he depletes not only his body, but also his subtle energy systems. In Taoist philosophy, this energy is called Jing, the vital essence that fuels life and longevity. The loss of Jing leads to fatigue, confusion, emotional instability, and a lack of willpower. When retained, however, Jing transforms into Qi, energy, and then into Shun, spirit, allowing a man to evolve beyond base desire and a higher consciousness. In spiritual traditions across the world, from yogic brahmacharya to Christian celibacy to Taoist internal alchemy, this principle is universal. sexual energy must be mastered, not wasted. It is a sacred current that, when conserved, purifies the mind and amplifies the soul. Yet, the modern man, disconnected from wisdom, has turned this sacred energy into a toy. He spends it on screens, fantasies, and meaningless encounters. He ignores that this energy, when cultivated, could make him a leader, a visionary, a spiritual warrior. Instead, he chooses the path of depletion and calls it freedom. The decline in male vitality today is not just physical, it is psychological. Men who ignore wisdom become restless, anxious, and purposeless. They seek stimulation because their inner fire has been extinguished. Without the discipline of semen retention, they lack the energetic foundation to build focus, resilience, and emotional stability. Every ejaculation is an expenditure of creative energy. When that energy is wasted repeatedly, the mind becomes dull, the emotions unstable, and the willpower weak. The man begins to lose confidence, charisma, and spiritual presence. He becomes reactive to life rather than proactive in it. This is why ancient masters saw sexual restraint not as denial, but as empowerment. It trains the mind to govern the body. It rewires the brain to prioritize purpose over pleasure. It teaches delayed gratification, which is the foundation of success in all areas, whether business, relationships, or spiritual growth. Men who ignore wisdom chase dopamine. Men who live by wisdom cultivate discipline. One leads to temporary pleasure. The other leads to eternal power. The modern male has traded his priesthood for pleasure, his discipline for distraction. He was designed to be a vessel of divine order, to protect, build, and create. But in a world where lust is cheap and virtue is mocked, many men no longer see their sexual energy as sacred. In spiritual symbolism, semen represents the seed of creation. To spill it carelessly is to disregard the creative laws of the universe. It is a rejection of divine order. When men lived by wisdom, they understood that mastery over sexual energy brought them closer to God. They recognized that retaining the seed was a form of worship, a reverence for life, and for the divine spark within. But now, the average man has become spiritually barren. His energy flows downward, his thoughts are scattered, and his inner light is dim. He seeks purpose through external things, status, validation, lust, but never finds it. He ignores the call of the soul that whispers, "Be still and know." Wisdom calls men to stillness, reflection, and restraint. Ignoring that call leads to chaos. It is why so many men today are anxious, depressed, and lost. They have become disconnected from their divine center, their creative essence. A man's power without wisdom becomes destruction. Strength without restraint becomes aggression. Desire without discipline becomes addiction. This is the tragedy of the modern male psyche. When wisdom guided men, strength was tempered by purpose. Warriors fought not for pleasure, but for protection. Kings ruled not for ego, but for divine order. The masculine energy was sacred because it was harnessed and refined. Before we continue, subscribe to this YouTube channel. But when men ignore wisdom, the same energy that can build civilizations begins to destroy them. Lust replaces love, pride replaces purpose, and chaos replaces creation. Semen retention is one of the ancient systems that preserved masculine energy from falling into this decay. It channeled the raw sexual fire into creative and spiritual evolution. To reject, it is to reject the path of mastery and to embrace the path of mediocrity. It is to trade the sword of clarity for the chains of compulsion. Every man must decide what governs him, wisdom or desire. Wisdom leads him toward growth, purpose, and truth. Desire leads him toward depletion, distraction, and despair. Semen retention, when understood deeply, is not merely a rule about physical abstinence. It is the embodiment of wisdom itself. It is saying, I will not waste what is sacred. I will not allow my lower nature to rule my higher purpose. It is the choice to live by principle rather than impulse. When men practice retention, they become more conscious of where their energy goes. They become more intentional in thought, word, and action. This self-awareness opens the door to inner transformation. They begin to hear again the voice of wisdom that the world has silenced, the inner teacher that says, discipline is divine. To ignore this is to wander in confusion. Wisdom is the compass. Semen retention is the path it illuminates. It is not too late for men to return to wisdom. The modern age may be filled with distractions, but truth never dies. It only waits to be remembered. The man who chooses to retain his seed begins to walk a forgotten path, a path of renewal, strength, and spiritual clarity. He begins to see that his energy is the foundation of his creativity, his leadership, and his peace. He stops living as a consumer of pleasure and becomes a creator of purpose. When men practice retention, they experience clarity of mind. The fog of lust lifts and intuition sharpens. Inner peace. Emotional chaos subsides, replaced by calm presence. Magnetic energy. Their aura strengthens. People feel their power. Spiritual connection. They sense divine purpose guiding their actions. This is not superstition. It is natural law. What you conserve, you magnify. What you waste, you weaken. When men ignore wisdom, they destroy themselves quietly. When they return to it, they rebuild themselves completely. The journey from depletion to power begins with awareness. A man must first see how far he has fallen. He must admit that wisdom has been replaced by desire, and that his potential has been traded for momentary satisfaction. Then, he must begin the slow, sacred work of restoration. Retention is not just about not releasing, it is about redirecting. It means converting raw sexual energy into higher creativity, service, and self-mastery. It means purifying the mind and aligning it with divine will. As he practices this, the man becomes a channel of wisdom once again. His eyes regain fire. His words carry weight. His presence inspires respect. This is the restoration of true masculinity, not dominance, but discipline, not indulgence, but integrity. When he walks in this energy, the world feels his return. For when men rise in wisdom, families heal, communities strengthen, and nations are transformed. Men have ignored wisdom entirely, and the consequences are visible everywhere. Broken families, mental illness, addiction, confusion, and despair. These are not merely social issues. They are spiritual symptoms of energetic depletion. Semen retention is one of the oldest remedies known to man, a way to restore balance, power, and purpose. It reconnects him with his divine essence and teaches him to use energy consciously rather than compulsively. When men return to wisdom, they will remember what they were meant to be: creators, protectors, and visionaries. But as long as they continue to waste what is sacred, they will remain lost, powerless kings in a kingdom of noise. It is time for men to return to the throne of wisdom, to silence the lust that blinds them, and to reclaim their divine energy. Semen retention is not repression, it is resurrection. To ignore wisdom is to choose decay. To embrace it is to choose life. The choice, as always, is in the hands of men. Subscribe to the YouTube channel.